The other story that we're following is the Florida senator who used to be the leader of the Democratic Party is jumping into the race for governor, but Jason Pizzo will not be running as a Democrat. Take a look. Pizzo plans to run as an independent in the 2026 race. He announced his plans during an interview with Miami CBS affiliate WFOR. The state senator represents parts of Broward and Miami-Dade counties, and he assumed leadership of the Senate Democrats after the 2024 election. But in a speech last month, Pizzo condemned the party as, quote, dead, and likened the state of bipartisanship to, quote, the fall of Rome, end quote. He says he won't officially enter the race until September. Other opponents in the governor's race include Republican Congressman Byron Donalds. On the Democratic side, we have former Congressman David Jolly, who switched from Republican to Democrat. Ryan, as the chair of the Leon County Democratic Party, you've got to be very unhappy when you hear someone from the Democratic Party say that it's dead. What's your reaction to all of this?
Well, I think that it's more Jason Pizzo's stock within the Democratic Party that was dead. Frankly, a lot of us who followed him for a long time aren't terribly surprised by this. I'm old enough to remember when he unseated an incumbent black Democrat by saying she's too much of a Republican. She votes with the Republicans too much. And then I think continued to bludgeon his way to the center, I think the right, really. So frankly, he was just a bad fit for the caucus. David Jolly, a swing area congressman, into the party. Jason Pizzo out of the party. I'll take that all day long.
It seems like everyone's changing party affiliations, Mitch.
Yeah, it's very interesting development. I guess the thing is, whether you're David Jolly or Jason Pizzo running as an independent or running as a Democrat, you're going to be a big underdog in this race coming up next year. I mean, I think, Ryan, you'll acknowledge that.
Definitely.
And I think with Pizzo, right, he had, I mean, there's obviously reasons in his own, range, what he's looking at here, but it's going to be really challenging. We haven't seen an major independent run since Charlie Crist in 2010. Didn't turn out too well. But I think that's, again, where the state of the Democratic Party is when it comes to these big statewide elections right now, and you have a disparity of the voter registration, somewhat about 8 points or so, roughly. He's putting a lot of stock in independents, NPA voters, which he now is, which, some political scientists will tell you aren't really purely centrist voters. They do lean more left or right. They just don't, for different reasons, want to be part of a political party. So, I mean, the Democrats have been hoping that those NPAs would be their savior in recent years, and it's not turned out that way. But I'll be curious to see, again, how this develops in terms of the other candidates. Jolly is not officially announced yet. He probably will within the next few weeks, he says, and I'm sure that is going to be the case. But will we see anybody else, Democratic mayors, Democrats come in? That will be interesting to see as well. You mentioned Byron Donalds. He is by far the leading candidate right now. He's got the Trump imprimatur behind him. He's also raised close to $15 million right now already with no other Republican in sight.
When you look at the statistics for no party affiliation registered voters in Florida, it's about a quarter of registered voters in the state of Florida. Kim, how does that work in his favor?
Well, first of all, Mr. Pizzo, I would say when you're going to leave, just leave. You don't have to scorch earth when you leave, right? Because there is a forever that happens after that, right? So, but I say, okay, welcome. Good luck. I think there's going to be a plethora of people who want to run for governor, it seems like. And the big question will be, can they overcome Byron Donalds' Trump endorsement as we get closer to the primary? Because we saw what happened to Adam Putnam, a guy who would have been a great governor, wanted it his whole life, and in one tweet and in one endorsement, it was all over. And so I think that the other thing I would say is, whether we like it or not, and we agree with it or not, we are a two-party system in this country. We are a constitutional republic with a two-party system. We don't really have the structure, the infrastructure for third parties. Doesn't mean they shouldn't, but we don't really have that kind of structure to support that. But I say, come on in, all are welcome.
Right, Jackie, as an investigative reporter for so many years, the Hope Florida Foundation situation involving the governor and several members of the administration, it really seemed like it quieted down the conversations about Casey DeSantis possibly running. How do you, as an investigative reporter, see all of this play out?
Well, I would have loved to have seen either the First Lady or the governor take a modicum of responsibility over the Hope Florida. I think that has soured a lot of people. That is a lot of money. And as a consumer investigator, I was always under the impression that Hope Florida, I had actually referred people, especially during times of post-hurricanes when people were flailing, or after the pandemic when Hope Florida was created, people were struggling for jobs and they really needed some assistance. I put my faith in Hope Florida, referring people to that agency thinking that they were doing the most good. And now we're finding out not that much money was given out. And to me, it is just such sour grapes to think we have been sold this bill of goods for 2 or 3 years now, that this was an agency doing the most good for Floridians who needed it most. And now we're finding out some of how this came to be and some of where that money meant. I was so disheartened to see that the money went for political purposes, what could be pursued as political purposes, rather than helping Floridians, which is what it was sold to us as. I can't imagine that she would have any ground as a politician after what we've seen. And also the fact that the state legislature went so far in investigating this, and all of a sudden it was like, there's probably criminal wrongdoing, but the buck stops here because we are not prosecutors. And if you have a Florida Republican-led appointed Attorney General, I don't know how this goes any further.
It probably doesn't, actually, not at the state level. And there was some thought that the feds might pick this up, the Trump administration, Pam Bondi, or the U.S. Attorney in North Florida. That doesn't look like it's going to happen, at least right now. But you're absolutely right, Jackie. This was the big thing in Tallahassee in April, and then the last committee hearing. It's like, okay, we're done now. I know Speaker Perez said at one point, this is still going on. I'm not taking my box back to Miami until next year when this, and he even hinted that this could be going on throughout the summer, but it doesn't look like it right now.
Well, and I don't think there's any chance at the federal level right now, until after the election's over, that this is going to be pursued. And it's certainly, from my point of view, it's very disappointing, and it doesn't pass the smell test for sure.
In the state of Florida, we have the rule that you have to resign in order to run, and when is the deadline for that, and how soon do you expect to see more people, Mitch, coming and declaring?
Well, you got a long time left. You still have a year to qualify, as actually Mrs. DeSantis said yesterday. So, we can see a lot happening. I want to mention another candidate in this mix, by the way, John Morgan. And you talked about, third parties. He's talking about kind of crazily, we're creating a third party. I don't see that happening, because he says he might run, but he won't run as an independent. So and he's not going to run as a Democrat. I don't know how that works, but there's still plenty of time. And I can't believe, as a political reporter, that in the spring of 25, this is already over in the fall of 26 in terms of who we know is going to be running. I think there's a lot of time left here.